Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of Hormones, Metabolism, and You. I'm your host, Dr. Cassie Smith. I'm a functional endocrinologist based out of Oklahoma City. This week, I wanted to talk about fertility issues. I brought on a very special guest who specializes, she's a naturopathic doctor in just fertility issues. About 1 in 4 women struggle with fertility now. I talk about this in my book. I have several chapters on fertility. The fertility rates in the United States were the lowest they've ever been in 2022, and then they got even lower in 2023. So it is something that people are struggling with, and the question is why? And so I brought on Dr. Kelsey Duncan, and we talked about why is infertility on the rise? Is it that it really is more common, or is it that we're talking about it more? Like, what is going on? Is it that we have more diseases, we have more illness, our adrenals are, stressed, our hormones aren't being made, our guts are a wreck, or is it that we're just now realizing and talking about it? So we talk about that. We talk about how traditional medicine overlooks fertility issues. So what are things that are overlooked in traditional medicine that could be keeping you from having a baby successfully that are very simple things, like optimizing your thyroid appropriately, your insulin levels, your gut, things like that a lot of times traditional medicine doctors just don't even check the right levels because they don't know how, they're not taught, or they don't know how to interpret them. So we do a deep dive into labs and things that are overlooked from a fertility perspective so that you don't end up in these, fertility clinics where you're spending $50,000 and $100,000 without having a proper workup prior, because that's what really kills me. We talk a little bit about PCOS, and then she tells us about her Fertility Confidence Method and some of the 4 basic pillars she looks at when she's helping people become fertile. So sleep, nutrition, movement are some of the things, and then mindset that she really looks at. So we just kind of walk you through some of those things, like some basic things that we need to be doing before we even think about getting pregnant, because if we're not doing those things, it's going to be very difficult to not only conceive, but to keep a baby. And so I hope that you find this episode informational. Dr. Kelsey Duncan, after being told at a young age that she'd likely struggle to get pregnant with no support or guidance offered to her at the time, she made it her mission to offer better healthcare to women. She's based out of Canada, and she believes women deserve the information to make informed decisions, the support that they need to be successful, and the confidence in knowing that they're doing everything within their power to make a baby. She uses a 3-pillar fertility success system that's helped bring hundreds of babies into the world, using evidence-driven medicine and supporting you regardless of where you are in your fertility journey, not journal. When she's not helping couples, you can find her spending time with her 2 kids who are 9 and 6, watching trashy reality TV when they go to bed, and spending time up north by the water. So let's dive into this conversation about infertility, because it is something that's very common. And if you're struggling with this, know you're not alone. We're going to talk about a lot of safe spaces here, and please make sure you share this with anyone who would find it beneficial. So thank you so much for joining me today on this episode, Dr. Kelsey Duncan. She's also known as the Fertility Confidence Method on Instagram. So I wanted to bring you on so you could chat with our listeners about fertility. I know that's what you do. I have lots of questions about fertility. I want to cover, why is infertility on the rise? What are some of the common infertility things that maybe are overlooked in traditional medicine that you see and that we can help with? We may talk a little bit about the gut. So we have lots of great things I want to talk about. But first, can you just kind of tell our listeners what you do on a day-to-day, how you got here? Why is this your passion?
Yeah, I love that. Well, first, thank you for having me. Naturopathic medicine sort of fell into my lap in a weird way. My journey started with cystic acne and then kind of flowed into this interesting segue into the fertility world on my kind of last ditch effort to heal my acne. I was going to try an IUD, and through that process, I had a very traumatic experience and was told that I would probably struggle to get pregnant. And that was kind of it. There was no real explanation, no counseling, no coaching. I was 22, I was young. It wasn't something on my radar in that moment, but I was already in the natural medicine world at that point. And so my brain kind of took me on this journey of okay, what would I tell a future patient if this was the experience that they had? And the first thing was, well, we don't really know anything. I'm just going going off of kind of crappy offhand comment. So let's figure out, is there legitimately an issue, and what is the root cause, and what can I do now to actually make that not be my story? And so, unlike the majority of my clients and my patients, I had this interesting warning red flag moment when I was very young that made me focus on my fertility for years before I even actively started trying, and very fortunately was successful. I have 2 amazing kiddos at home, but it really opened my eyes, like through my journey in my teens with acne, and then this kind of being like the cherry on the cake of just how women are so poorly treated in our mainstream medical model, and not just in the fertility space, but any sort of period concern is usually just brushed off, normalized, given the birth control pill. Nothing's really dug deep into figuring out, like, why is this actually a problem? And the funny thing is, working in the fertility realm, all of those women that had complaints in their teens are typically the women who are actually struggling to get pregnant in their 30s. And so if we took those complaints seriously and actually found the root cause earlier, we could likely decrease the amount of couples who are struggling to get pregnant and or help women plan appropriately at a younger age if having kids early isn't on the table for them. So it really triggered my belief system in, like, what is the root cause? Infertility is just an ICD-10 code. It's barely a diagnosis. There's a reason we aren't getting pregnant, and it's not just a female issue. You know, men are 50% of the equation. So we need to dig deeper and figure out what is actually the reasoning behind you not getting pregnant. So Fertility Confidence Method kind of takes a bit of a 2-strand approach, so to speak, meaning we work with couples all through their fertility journey, depending on where they're at. We have couples who are years into trying, who've had multiple failed rounds of IVF and other medicated cycles looking for support. And we have couples who have just started trying, who are being proactive, who have concerns, but are getting brushed off in the traditional medical model and are seeking answers and support. So my role is to basically help them be a detective and help them advocate for themselves in the traditional model. Because in my world, as a naturopathic doctor, it's still not one or the other. There really should be a synergistic approach between traditional care and alternative care. And we have the research, especially in the fertility space, to support that. And so by helping our clients and educating them and bringing them the literature and supporting them and having these conversations, we're able to have more collaborative care and hopefully quicker success rates.
I love that. So I love that story. I think that typically the people that I meet that are doing amazing things in the world have a good purpose, a good story, a good drive. And I completely agree. Like, I had a lot of acne as a teenager, had a lot of issues with irregular menstrual cycles. I was just given birth control when I was a teenager, like, oh, this will fix everything. And then when I turned 30 and I get off my birth control, oh no, you really have insulin resistance and you have PCOS and your hormones are a nightmare. And it's like, nobody told me that from 13 to 30 or 14 to 30. And so I think that, yes, educating people, and instead of just like band-aiding issues, trying to figure out why did you have acne, why were all these things happening, is really important. And I would love your take on this. I don't know if infertility is really on the rise or if it's just more talked about now. I think it is on the rise, though, if you look at how many people are having issues conceiving. And the scary thing, I talk about this in my book that's coming out. 2022, fertility in the United States hit an all-time low ever. It was even worse in 2023 and then even worse in 2024. So more and more people are struggling with this. They're struggling with having children, being able to conceive. And I think it's because, for 20 or 30 years now, we've been in this society with bright lights and high cortisol levels and eating terrible food and fillers and dyes. And then now we're asking these people to reproduce, and there's lots of reasons your body is like, maybe not the best thing to do right now, right? It almost is like that sensing, like it doesn't sense that we're safe. It's almost like it's sensing that there's a lot of danger. So I would be curious, do you feel like infertility is on the rise? If so, why? And what are you seeing when people are coming to you with infertility? Is it just people are stressed and not eating well, or are you actually seeing pathologic and like medical conditions related to it?
Yeah, I think to kind of answer your first question around like, is this actually a bigger problem or are we just talking about it more? I do think it's a combination of both. Yes, rates are rising. Yes, we have, even in the last decade, we used to spew the statistic 1 in 6 couples have troubles getting pregnant. And now we're starting to see it's more like 1 in 5. And so we're already, even in a short period of time, noticing enough of an increase in the stats that we're seeing that quick change. We have great literature with male fertility and since the 60s or the 40s or something, watching a very steep decline in sperm health, and our ideas of what is good has drastically declined in the male fertility realm. So I think we're hearing about it more. I think there's more availability for testing. So because of that, we're getting better statistics. For example, my parents were young when they had me. They waited a couple of years. They wanted a third child. My mom couldn't get pregnant. They drove 2 hours to this fertility clinic. My mom said it was like the only one in Toronto. There was no other option. And this was back in like the early 90s. And she's like, I remember we did like some blood work and they told us that we should do IVF. And at that time it was going to cost like $8,000, which is laughable now because that's nothing compared to what it costs now. But that wasn't an option for them on the table. But she said, I knew nobody else at that point that even thought about going that route. It was just, we can't get pregnant. We can't get pregnant. So in those years, the statistics aren't going to be as clear, right? Because we're not investigating. Whereas now we are, and more couples are seeking support. And so we're getting a better understanding. But to go with your point of like our environment, that's a very big change now compared to 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. Our environment is completely different. We are definitely a more high-strung population now than we likely were in some areas of the world, more than others. We have Wi-Fi and all kinds of new technology that we really don't have good total long-term data about. Our soil and our food quality is different. Our convenience and processed foods is much higher, much more accessible. So I think there's a lot we still don't know about how our environment is negatively impacting our fertility. And I also think that we don't have enough conversations when we're younger about how our choices could influence our fertility in the future, because some of it really is genetics. And if we're taking care of our bodies, if we're eating well and we're sleeping and we're exercising and we're nourishing ourselves and we're managing our stress and we're doing that in a way that we're still enjoying our early 20s in that time period, but we're still making smart, impactful decisions, we're keeping those genes from potentially turning on, and we're lessening our potential for autoimmune conditions that can influence fertility. We're lessening our potential for hormonal disruptions that can influence our fertility. So there's a lot to be said about what we don't know. I think at the end of the day, in terms of how our world has changed, and I think there's a lot of speculation, and we could probably talk for hours about the potential impact. And I don't think it's one specific thing. My belief is that it's a culmination of all of the tiny changes coupled with higher amounts of stress, coupled with longer use of birth control and longer time to diagnosis for women. So like your story is a very common one I hear. Periods weren't great when we were 13, 14. We went on the pill. We stayed on the pill for 15, 20 years. Everything was fine. We had a regular bleed, no complaints, come off the pill because we want to get pregnant. Periods gone, periods weird. Now we're like, what the heck is going on? And now we've got years we might need to take to fix that we're just prolonging that experience.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to explain all of it. That, and just like over time, I go back to Dr. Jill. I love Dr. Jill. I've interviewed her before, but she does a lot of toxic mold, heavy metal stuff. And she talks about our capacity as humans being this big bucket. And as we get toxins, our bucket fills with water, and where our body is supposed to process toxins and negative exposures and things like that by removing them. And so then the water would come out of the bucket. But if you're being exposed quicker than you can get rid of things, then eventually your water starts overflowing. And that's when you start having issues. And we do a really good job in this country of covering things up, band-aiding them, not educating people, keeping them sick, because it's a big business. I know you're in Canada, so I can't say for you, but in the United States, unfortunately, healthcare is a complete and utter train wreck. We're working on trying to fix it. I'm super excited about the recent nomination for Surgeon General with Casey Means. But I mean, healthcare is just like, it's a big business. Like, they want you to be sick. And so the best way to keep you from asking questions and keep you sick is to give you the birth control, to give you, because then you have to come back to get your birth control refilled. It's not to like, oh, let's talk about your diet as a 13-year-old. Are you eating a bunch of crap that gives you acne? It's let's give you something so you have to come see a doctor every year starting at 13 until you're older. Like, that's ridiculous, And so I think there are a lot of problems, but that's definitely one of them. And it is really rewarding when you meet someone like yourself. And that's why I love doing this podcast, when people just ask why, no, I don't want to go with mainstream. I want to know what I can do to fix myself. And I think there's so much power in that, and we're moving towards that, which is awesome. But I do feel like there are higher rates of infertility, and we're talking about it more. And it's really, really important. And, PCOS, I mean, there's so many different types of PCOS now. I wrote about that in my book. Like, there's about 6 different types of PCOS. There's actually a post-pill PCOS, which is what I'm pretty sure that I got. Although I may have had a combination of like an adrenal type PCOS and thyroid issues as well, because I wasn't the super heavy overweight person with soaring insulin levels. But it's just very interesting. And fertility is just, like you said, I feel like a lot of times doctors are just like, oh, well, you're infertile. Oh, well. Or it's like, okay, fine, let's just shuttle you into this infertility clinic that costs $100,000 to get pregnant. And the number of people that I have seen that have gone through those experiences, which are not wonderful because they're, changing your hormones with medications and they're expensive, before somebody even used their brain and like looked at their thyroid, asked them questions, things like that, is really kind of scary,
Yeah, it's totally scary. And it's, not all clinics are the same. And I've already mentioned, like, I'm not against fertility treatments, needing the medications, doing IVF. I think everyone has to make the right decision for them and their bodies. What I am against is kind of exactly what you just said of, yes, we might need those clinics, and I recommend my clients go and have assessments done, get their foot in the door, so that if we need it, like, we've got it there in our back pocket. And we still need to ask the questions and investigate, like taking letrozole to try to get you to ovulate if you have PCOS and you have insulin resistance and elevated testosterone. Like, sure, Clomid or Clomiphene or letrozole or Femera, they might push your body to ovulate. But if the insulin resistance is still present, you're still at a high risk of miscarriage. You're still at a high risk, if you are able to get pregnant and carry, of gestational diabetes and preeclampsia. There's other complications than just not ovulating that still need to be managed. So maybe we need the medication, yes, eventually, to help get your body to ovulate, but we still have to work and fix the environment in which we are trying to get pregnant. And that's not just PCOS, that's true for many female factor diagnoses. It's like, sure, maybe we do need IVF, but let's make sure we're walking through that door with a body that's fully capable of carrying a pregnancy. We're reducing your rate of miscarriage with working on the foundational aspects of health and lowering inflammation and doing those things before we need the treatments. And that's where the system is broken, is it's just hopping you on this conveyor belt of, okay, we're going to try a few rounds of medicated time intercourse. We're going to try a few rounds of medicated IUI. Those haven't worked. Okay, IVF's now your only option. But through that entire conveyor belt system, they might not once have asked, Are you taking any supplements? They might not have looked any deeper than an AMH and basic hormone levels. They might not have done any sort of deeper dive into microbiome or autoimmune conditions or other sperm male factors that could be playing a role, or talked about diet or stress or exercise or how you're sleeping. We're just moving people along this checklist, but the checklist has holes. And so that's where someone like myself can come in and say, okay, cool, we're in the checklist now. That's fine. But let's make sure we're actually filling the holes so that you hopefully don't make it to the end of the checklist and still have nothing to show for it. That's the important part.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so frustrating when that's, the gamut that you get put through, but nobody talks to you about the easy things like sleep and stress and food and exercise. And
so, we have research. We actually have legitimate, like peer-reviewed data on how sleep can impact fertility for both men and women, and supplements and nutrition and exercise and stress. Like, so many times I'll have clients come out of their fertility clinic appointments and they ask their doctor, what else can I do? And their doctor's like, nothing, there's nothing else you can do. And I'm like, and luckily, they already know that's not true, right? But for all of the people who aren't in the world on social media about reading about all the other options, who are just in the mainstream model, and my heart breaks for them because they are missing very vital pieces that ultimately investing finances into themselves and their own health will likely save them money down the line, time, heartbreak. They might not even need to make embryos, like there's just so many factors on the table where especially when I have couples come to me years in and they've done all of that, and then I find out that like they've had bare bones blood work, they're, taking a prenatal and that's it. Their husband hasn't done anything. It's like, well, you guys we've skipped a lot of steps here. And that's not your fault, like let's grieve that, but it's also not your fault that you weren't getting proper care. And this is where building a care team around you becomes so important, because we need to acknowledge that not all doctors are experts at every single thing. The clinic is good at what they're good at, and that is using medication to support your body and doing some physical investigation like the ultrasounds and things like that. But they're not the place to go to talk about foundational health. That's not what they learn, and that's okay. So how do we fill in the gaps? You work with other providers. You build a team around you of people who are specific for your needs, because your care and your plan should always be built by what your body specifically needs. You've already said there's multiple types of PCOS. We're not going to treat every single person with PCOS exactly the same. We need to know what their unique fertility identifiers are and build out a care plan that might involve multiple different types of practitioners to get them feeling their best version of themselves.
Yeah, and that's even when we're not talking about infertility, right? So like just in general, to be healthy, everyone's plan is going to be different. So like I hate that when people come to me and they're like, well, I have PCOS, so I've been on metformin and that's what I'm supposed to take. And I'm like, okay, well, did anyone talk to you about diet? No. Has anyone talked to you about Ivositol? No. Has anyone talked to you about sleep or movement? No. What about your insulin? Like, it's just like, oh my God, we're missing so many opportunities, I guess we would say. And then, my question is like, especially if it's somebody who doesn't look like they have PCOS, that's not like a typical PCOS, or it's like, okay, well, do you have thyroid issues? I don't know. Do you have adrenal issues? I don't know. Or my favorite is like, they said I might have PCOS, but they didn't really know. So I don't know. And I'm just like, okay, so we've continued to have these metabolic derangements and hormonal derangements for years. And nobody thought like, maybe we should really figure out whether this person has PCOS or not, so that we can help tailor a plan for them to make themselves better. And so it is just very frustrating, because it's going to be impossible almost to become fertile and pregnant and keep a viable, healthy pregnancy unless you have a plan or like a metabolic layout of yourself, right? So like for me, for example, I had Graves and then Hashimoto's. I know that I am predisposed to thyroid issues and antibodies. So I know that if I don't sleep well and take my LDN and eat well, then my antibodies flare up and my periods get irregular and I feel terrible. I know that I have insulin issues. And so if I want to eat like, an idiot, then I don't feel well. I get really sleepy. I get really bloated. Like my ring will tell you when it doesn't come off if I'm not eating how I'm supposed to be eating. So but it took me years to know all this. I know that I'm predisposed to having like leaky gut and SIBO and things like that with my gut, because I'm also a very like type A stressed out type of person. So I've worked on that. Like I work on a lot of like meditation, positive thoughts, manifesting, yoga, they're all pieces to the puzzle, right? And so and I've been through the fertility journey, unfortunately, good and bad. And I can tell you that walking into a fertility clinic at 36 and just being like, oh, take all these shots, it'll be fine, which make you feel insane clinically, I can vouch. And then also doing that when you're not healthy, when your insulin's not right and your thyroid's not right and your cortisol's messed up and you're not sleeping well, it not only does it not work, it makes you even sicker and then trust the system even less. And it's just really a frustrating process for everyone, instead of really focusing on how do we give this person the tools to fix all of these things, right? So that then when we do try to help them get pregnant, they have a safe, good environment. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. My dream is that in all fertility clinics, they will have to do some version of Fertility Confidence Method while they're waiting for their referral. Let's teach people the basics, the foundational pieces before we even walk through the door, so that they can do their job better. Their statistical rates of pregnancy will go up. People will be healthier. People will get through the process easier. And I bet you 25% of the people that have an appointment that are waiting won't need it, because they'll end up getting pregnant while they're waiting, just with the foundational aspects and the root cause pieces that they need to dive into. And some clinics are doing a better job at having those conversations. And here in Ontario, some of our fertility clinics have naturopathic doctors on staff. They don't have to work with them. It's like an option that you can book in with them. When we share files and yada, yada, but there's more and more conversation happening, I think, both in Canada and the US of okay, this is what you're telling me to do, but women are getting smarter to say, well, you still haven't told me why, to full circle moments back to the beginnings, you still haven't actually told me why. And if you don't have your why, we likely haven't dug deep enough yet. And there's always going to be an aspect with some clients, a very, very small proportion of them, where medicine just hasn't quite caught up from a testing perspective, that we might not actually be able to figure it out. If there's some sort of deep-rooted genetic, and I would even argue autoimmune issue, because there's still a lot of ambiguity in that arena in terms of health, that maybe are what we have available to us and what is even financially an option for you, we still can't find the answer, but we can likely make some assumptions with the information that we have. And so we're often counseling our clients who have, been around the block for many, many cycles and have been told they have unexplained infertility and that everything looks fine, is well, no, we need to look a little bit deeper. And that's where we start having the conversations around the immune system. And, thyroid antibodies is something that's not routinely checked, yet 1 in 10 women have thyroid issues. It's very, very common. And once you have one autoimmune condition, you're at mega risk of developing others. We're not screening women for celiac disease. We're not regularly screening women for any sort of autoimmune condition in the fertility space, yet we're watching them have recurrent miscarriage and telling them, that it'll all work out in the end. So I think there's more that testing needs to catch up for some people, but there's also a lot of women and men walking around who think they've had all the testing done and that nothing could be found, when there's still doors to be opened.
Yeah, 2 things to add to that. Insulin levels. So I see a ton of people who have had an A1C and a fasting glucose, and they're like, oh, I'm fine, even though their fasting glucose is a little high and maybe even their A1C. None of that matters. You need to know what your insulin level is, because I see people with insulin levels in the 60s, 30s, 50s with normal glucose and A1C. If your insulin is that high and you conceive a child, you have right then at that exact moment predisposed that child to being much more likely to developing diabetes. We're already at high risk in America. If you, as a mom, have insulin resistance, you pass 100% of your mitochondria to your baby. So congratulations, if your insulin's high and you get pregnant, you've pretty much determined for your child that they are going to have insulin resistance issues because of the genetic predisposition we already have. So that's not fair to your child or to you, and nobody's checking that level. And so that's one thing that really drives me batty too, is like I tell my girls all the time that have insulin levels like that, let's work on this before we get pregnant, because it's not fair to genetically imprint that on your child before they're even born. And the other one is free T3 levels. So thyroid is very important when you're pregnant, because your baby doesn't have a working thyroid until it is 18 weeks of gestation. So your baby is getting all thyroid hormone from you. I see this all the time. Thyroid and progesterone levels, I think, are two of the top. Thyroid, progesterone, and insulin are the top three reasons people have miscarriages. And if your thyroid's not functioning well because you have high insulin, or for whatever reason you're inflamed and your body's not actually making active thyroid hormone, which is T3, so your body has to make TSH or your body has to make T4, and then that's converted to T3. If you don't have enough T4 to cross the placenta to get to the baby so it can develop, or enough T3 so that you personally as the mom have energy, then you have a problem. And so many OBs, and mostly all of them, and fertility clinics check a TSH and they just like hang their hat up. And that is completely malpractice, ridiculous, awful, and infuriates me, because you're not doing anyone any favors. And so those are some labs too that I think are just really important that we completely miss. And just that in itself, in addition to gut testing, like we were talking about, like getting your gut right. I mean, I would say more than 25% of people are going to end up having babies if you just fix those things instead of charging them $50,000 and giving them in vitro. Just my 2 cents. But can you tell us some of so you said Fertility Confidence Method. What is this method? Like, is this like some big secret, or can you tell us like what are some of the steps
This is my big
that we're
secret.
supposed to be doing?
Yes, let me share you my big secret. So I am of the belief of we need to dig and dig and dig until we find the root cause and the foundational health pieces. So I take our clients through a bit of a 3-step process. So we start with discovery. We want to know why. You usually come to work with me because someone's told you something and you still don't have answers, or you're seeking support and your doctor's like, oh, you're young, you're healthy, keep trying, come back in a few months and like we'll see what happens. Or you've had treatment cycles that have been unsuccessful and now you're going, well, why would I take the next step if we still don't actually know why this isn't working? You have questions. And so we want to know the answers to those questions. And 9 times out of 10, you've had a very basic look at what levels would look like in blood. Some of my clients, their partners haven't even been tested, or a big problem I see is if there is a female factor or male factor diagnosis, like let's say we know you have PCOS, we know you have endometriosis, we know your partner has low sperm count. Once they find one thing, they typically stop looking. And fertility is very multifactorial. So we always want to make sure we're covering all of our bases and we're digging deep. So we want to uncover what the root cause is, and then we're going to build you a personalized care plan based on your own unique fertility identifiers. We then put all of our clients through what I call the accelerator process. So this is kind of our foundational aspect. So we're going to walk you through how do we eat, how do we move our body, how should we be sleeping, how should we be managing our stress, how we should be doing this in a way that honors our cycle and our rhythm of our hormones and not just, adding to your to-do list. And this has been a really big transfer of like verbiage for us as a company over the last couple of years, is like, I don't want to be the person that tells you to do these 105 things to get pregnant. I believe in our motto for 2025 is that you don't need to be perfect to get pregnant. And a lot of the clients we work with are like me. They're high achieving, driven women, type A, give me all the things you want me to do, Kelsey, and I'll do it to a T, and I know you will. But sometimes we have to actually take a slower approach in this world and teach you how to slow down and how to nourish your nervous system and not just give you more and more and more and more things to do and pile it on your plate. So we want to teach our women, you don't have to be perfect to get pregnant. Here's how we honor our cycle. Here's how we can like tweak our nutrition and tweak our exercise to actually go with the ebb and flow of our estrogen and progesterone. And in that process, start to pull out inflammatory foods, do a little like gut check assessment, like how are you feeling? What do your symptoms look like? Should we not eat that anymore? Do we feel the same? Can we do a little kind of like semi-elimination trial and error, kind of get a lay of the land, especially for people who have never really explored that option before. It's a good way to kind of see like, well, what is my gut health actually like? Because I've kind of eaten the same way my whole life and I don't really know, is this good or bad? And then we follow along and we optimize. So we're always rechecking levels, checking in with them. I think what makes Fertility Confidence Method different than a lot of the other practitioners you're going to work with is I'm very hands-on. So I run a daily office hour with my clients so they can come and speak directly to me and ask questions. We usually spend about an hour. Sometimes it's 2 if we've got lots of people and lots of questions. We have an amazing community space because community medicine is so valuable and this is such an isolating and lonely journey and you shouldn't feel like you need to go through it alone. And I think that's one of my favorite aspects and something we get a lot of positive feedback on. So it's very different than going through the fertility space in mainstream medicine because you're going to get all the hand-holding and all of the support and all of the I believe you and none of the brushing off. So a lot of times I'm sharing research with our clients and saying, bring this back to your doctor, share it in this way. Let's push for this test or let's push for this medication to try or let's get a second opinion or let's actually just pause on the fertility clinic for a hot minute and because we've now found XYZ that we want to work on and do that. And so figuring out for each couple what that looks like for them and then walking them through the process with me and my team. We have an amazing nutritionist, mindset coach. We're always bringing in fun expert speakers. We have a relationship therapist that comes and speaks to our community every other month because that's another big, the mindset piece, we haven't talked about that today, but it's another big aspect. The physical body is so important, but the mental health aspect and the mindset piece with fertility, I think is equally as impactful from a treatment perspective. And we also see that in the literature. We have research showing women who do virtual CBT or therapy or join support groups while going through the fertility process have lower levels of depression and anxiety and typically have higher pregnancy rates from that as well. So finding whether it's Fertility Confidence Method or some other safe space for you, finding your community, I think is so important.
Yeah, I completely agree. So finding your community, working with a provider who understands, how things work as a whole. Do you do a lot of like blood tests? Do you do a lot of gut testing? You do all of that?
Yeah, the fertility world is very centered around blood work. I'm a very research-based practitioner. So when we're talking research, we typically look at blood work. We do a lot of uterine microbiome testing, which is still very like newish and controversial in the fertility space, but there's enough research for me and we're seeing it more and more. We actually just had a really exciting pregnancy in our community last week with someone. We've been working together with her for 3 years. She was doing IVF and prior to doing a transfer, she was like, I've heard you talking about the uterine microbiome and doing testing for like a year, Kelsey. I haven't done it yet. Should I do it before my transfer? And I was like, oh my God, yes, absolutely 100%. And it came back with very dysregulated levels of uterine bacteria. And it took us almost 6 months to clear it. And her very first transfer was successful. And I really do think if we hadn't done that testing, she likely would have been in for a string of heartbreaks and failed transfers and having to start back over and do more retrievals, all because this microbiome piece was likely there that whole time. And so we end up doing a little bit of like, functional testing. We do some gut testing, we do some adrenal testing if that sort of fits with our clients' needs. We're starting to explore HTMA and getting just a little bit more of a deeper look in terms of minerals and things like that we can help with. So it all depends kind of client to client, but blood work for anyone that's listening is always the first sort of place to go. And typically what your doctor's recommending is usually not the whole story. So we have a little mini course. It's called Fertility Labs 101. It's $17 and it's the exact workup that we request all of our clients do. And it'll explain to you like, why are we running these and what are the actual optimal levels that we're looking for? Because the reference range is just population average. And we know the population is pretty crappy at getting pregnant right now. So we don't necessarily want to compare to reference range. We actually want our levels to be optimal. And so we walk you through optimal numbers based on the data for both Canadian and American units for both men and women, so that if you've had labs done, you can compare and see what you're missing and what your numbers mean. Or if you haven't had labs done, then it's a good list of like what to push for with your doctor. And obviously, if you're in the US, you have the flexibility to private pay really easily and get labs done on your own or work with a functional medicine practitioner, a naturopathic doctor, or what have you.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. Like with our practice, I have a really good system where I have set up something with a place called Quest Diagnostics. It's everywhere in the United States, but they give our patients really discounted lab pricing, which is so nice. So I was actually just looking at it last night. I require new patients to do about 38 labs. That's what I want. I look at, cholesterol and lipoprotein and insulin and all sorts of things. And I may be adding leptin to that too now. But I mean, to get all of these labs, it's like 38 or 40 labs is like $400, maybe 420, which is, I mean, if you live in the United States and you get a lab bill ever, you see the just astronomical prices that they charge for ridiculous things. So I agree, like making sure that you get all these labs. A lot of times doctors don't order it because they don't know how to code it, or they say it won't get covered by insurance, or whatever. They don't know how to interpret it, but it is very important to have those labs. And I personally think when you're struggling with fertility issues, it's also very important to have a gut microbiome. I don't know a lot about vaginal microbiomes. I'm very intrigued, but gut microbiome, I mean, if you don't have a good gut microbiome, you are going to have a leaky gut. And if you have a leaky gut, you're going to have high insulin and you're going to have stress, and it's just not going to be good when you're pregnant. So I completely agree with that. I think making sure you have the right labs, you have the right provider who understands what they're doing, the right safe space, health coaches. I have a great health coach community. All those things are really, really important. And it is a very sad, lonely place to be. So I do think, talking about it more is also helpful, because there's so many people who go through it and think, oh, well, nobody else is going through this. And for people who are listening, I want you to know about 1 in 4 pregnancies in the United States end in some sort of miscarriage. A lot of times people don't even know they had a miscarriage, right? Like their period is late or it's really heavy, but it's about 1 in 4 people that conceive and are pregnant are actually having miscarriages. So if you're listening and you're like, man, I don't want to talk to anyone about this, nobody would understand, a lot more people would understand than you think. So yeah, it's just, I feel like it's not talked about a lot because maybe in the past it was taboo to talk about it, or maybe women felt like it was their fault, or maybe people just said it was our fault. But it takes 2 people to make a baby, and sometimes sperm is the problem as well. So I think just making that space available is super important. And then making sure that when you do get pregnant, all the things you need to do to be able to stay healthy. So what are some of your tips for that? Like, do you have some pretty basic tips that people can maybe follow if they're looking to get pregnant or wanting to stay pregnant around like exercise, food, nutrition, sleep, anything like that? Do you have some core things that you tell people?
Yeah, the 4 sort of foundational pillars that we talk about are sleep, movement, nutrition, and mindfulness. So the good thing is when you're actively working on improving your body to improve your chances of conceiving, you're going to roll a lot of that into pregnancy as well. We're not going to just revert back to how we were before. And so you're setting yourself up for success with pregnancy, because typically once you're pregnant, your brain is automatically going, I have to be, really on point here, because now I have someone else inside me that's going to be in my environment. So we kind of want to take that mentality ahead of time. And I would say like one sort of tip for each pillar, balancing your blood sugar is so incredibly crucial for a wide variety of reasons. And like what Cassie said around, even if you've done a hemoglobin A1C or fasted glucose and your numbers are normal, you still can have insulin resistance. So absolutely, yes, we want to look at that. But imbalanced blood sugar can have such a trickle-down effect in the fertility space in terms of egg quality and insulin and other hormones and your thyroid and your cortisol. Same goes with men. I 2 podcast episodes ago, so maybe 2 weeks ago, I talked about this on my podcast, how insulin resistance can impact men and women. So I think balancing your blood sugar, so regular meals, protein, fiber, fat with every meal, and paying attention. I think one of the easiest things you can do is actually just track your food for 2 or 3 days and be curious. Don't be judgmental. Just be curious. Where am I starting from? Because we can't make different decisions until we know that there's a different decision to be made. So you're doing your best with the information that you have right now. And when you get new information, we can adjust and pivot. And we don't want to scorn ourselves. We're like, well, I didn't know that was bad. You didn't know. Cool. But now you know. So what else can we do to improve things? And tracking and just seeing, how much protein am I getting? Ideally, you're getting over 100 grams a day, if not more, especially if you're exercising and resistance training. We're getting enough fiber. You're getting enough healthy fat. We're not crossing over crazy amounts of sugar. Let's just be a detective and be curious and see. And then one small change at a time is really the best way to do it. With sleep is so important. The research is so cool for both men and women with fertility, but generally for both, we want to see more than 7.5 hours of decent quality sleep every night. And if we're not allowing ourselves that time in bed, that's a big piece. If we're scrolling on our phone and watching TV and not having good sleep hygiene, but then complaining about being tired, those are really simple things. Yes, habits are hard to break, but at the end of the day, it really is a simple thing to change. And so giving yourself the opportunity to get good sleep is the best first step. Everyone should be moving their body. And if you're not right now, if you don't have a regular exercise routine, if you have a very sedentary job, walking is exercise, and it's so valuable to your body. And just walking can lower your insulin, and just walking can improve your cortisol. And you don't have to get a gym membership and spend 2 hours in the gym lifting weights every day to deem that exercise or to be healthy. If you're just getting out for a 30-minute walk, that is more than adequate. And sometimes we have to shift that mindset of, well, that's not what I used to do, so therefore it's not good enough. Whereas now it's like, well, that's what I can do, and that's better than nothing. And so just starting really low and slow, if you're not an avid exerciser already, but you're curious and you know the health benefits, just walk. Just set a really low goal and work up from there. Even if you start at 10 minutes and we just slowly work up week to week of getting a little bit more, a little bit further, a little bit more steps, that's going to make a world of difference. And then working on your mindset. It's so easy to feel like your body is broken and to feel alone and to feel like it's never going to end. And why is this happening to me? And why is, Suzanne pregnant after trying once and I'm not? And there's lots of ways we can make this journey feel a lot heavier, and working on how can you grieve through this process and work through and process the emotions is going to help you have not just the longevity to keep trying, but to have the capacity to advocate and the capacity to take care of yourself and be able to wake up every day and make the right choices. Whereas if we're stuck in a state of constant grief that we're not dealing with, then being healthy becomes harder. And so really working on the mindset piece, whether that's you needing to seek out therapy, whether that's support groups, whether that's you getting into a good routine at home with self-care or meditation. What everyone's journey with mindset is very different, and what resonates with you, and finding something that you not just enjoy but actually helps your nervous system. Like, I'm not a huge meditator. It's not something that my body seems to like really super benefit from, but I love tapping. I love doing a bit more of like an active meditation. I'm happy to just sit and do breath work versus like a silent, still sort of like corpsey meditation. So figuring out what your vibe is, because a lot of times people can be like, I tried that, it didn't help me. It's like, well, A, how hard did you try? In a polite way. And B, maybe that wasn't for you. And that's fine. Let's find you something else. So that's kind of like, yeah, those are the basics. Like, if you can start picking away at some of those things, it seems so bloody small, but it all adds up and snowballs into you now being able to dig deeper and make bigger changes and tweak and ask for more things and advocate and understand better. Oh, I actually feel good. I actually wasn't feeling that great 6 months ago when I was treating my body like this. So what does that mean? And start to kind of uncover other avenues that we can go, okay, that's curious. Maybe we should pull on that thread and see what else comes of that might help us understand why you aren't getting pregnant.
Yeah, I completely agree. So just going back to, you are one person and your one journey is different than others. So thank you so much for all of your wisdom and what you do for people, Dr. Kelsey. I appreciate that. I want to end by asking you like 4 quick questions, and then I'll let you kind of tell everyone where they can find you and what we can do to kind of serve and uplift you. So the first question is, what is one food that's most beneficial and why?
Oh my gosh. One food that's most beneficial. I am going to go with avocado.
Okay.
I feel
I
like
get
that's the
avocado.
best option. Yeah, it's fatty, it's fibery. Women typically are lower in fat and fiber. It's really easy to hide in a smoothie. It's really easy to put on other things. Like, the only downside with avocado is its obvious short usage window,
Yeah.
depending on where you live.
It's
In
hard to get
Ontario,
good ones, but yeah, no,
yeah,
I
I
love
don't have a
avocado.
lot of like
They're
great
too-
avocado experience where I live, but like I wish I did.
My husband gets so mad. He's like, yeah, like he like tries to like pick them so that they're perfect. And when he cuts into them, if they're perfect, he's like, this is a great avocado. Like, he gets all animated and excited, but yeah. Okay. So avocado, what is one thing that anyone can do to benefit their health that's completely free?
Oh my God, sleep. I'm so obsessed with sleep right now. I think like I kind of go in phases with what I think is the most important. It usually ebbs and flows with what I feel is most important in my own personal life. But going through, my youngest is 6 and she's never been a great sleeper, and she's just finally sleeping. And I feel like I'm finally, after, my oldest is almost 9, so 9 years of child rearing, I'm like, oh, this is what like regular sleep actually feels like. Like, that's very interesting. And we've just, I think, become such a society where it's just normal to live off 5 hours of sleep. And people are like, I've always been like that and I'm fine. And I'm like, but are
I
you
agree.
though?
I
Like,
agree.
are we really, or could we
Yeah.
be better? So I think sleep is so not talked about enough and so valuable for not just fertility, but mental health and your hormones and how everything inside you works.
Couldn't agree more. Sleep is very important, people. What is one thing that you wish that you would have known about your health 20 years ago that you would have done differently?
Oh my gosh. I really like, it's funny. I have no regrets with how my journey played out, because I'm doing something that I love so much and feel so passionate about and feel very strongly like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. And so it's hard to look back on my health journey that got me here and be like, oh, I wish I did that differently. But I wasted so many years trying every single type of birth control to give me clear skin, and it never did. And yet I kept trying it because that's what the doctor told me to do. That was my only option. And if I could have like my brain back when I was 13 and just start being more curious and asking questions ahead of like before all of that, I think my journey would have been very different. But I also feel very strongly like I would have had a very different teenage experience not going through that. So I would probably choose that.
Okay, that's very fair. And then the last question is there one book that you feel like has changed your life or that's very impactful?
Changed my life, or like a fertility book that I recommend?
Either, just a book that's very impactful.
You know, a book I recommend actually quite a bit is a book called Is Your Body Baby Friendly by Dr. Alan Beers. I read this book, I don't think I had Nyla, so 7 or 8 years ago maybe. I remember it was very early on in my career. I was working with a couple who were getting pregnant every time they tried and having a miscarriage every single time. And it was my first real experience with recurrent pregnancy loss, and everything, you know, bare bones that we were doing looked good. She was doing all the right things. The clinic really wanted them to do IVF, and we just kind of all of us kept saying like, well, how is that going to fix the problem? Like, why? And I remember coming across this book, and it really outlines the immune aspect of fertility. And I would say like reading that book changed my career and how I approach care with clients who have recurrent loss, who have unexplained infertility, who have recurrent implantation failure with IVF. And it's sad that even 7 years later, after reading this book, I tell clients in these situations, definitely read it. It's a hard read. It's not an easy, like, it's not written for normal, like, coffee and tea consumption. It's something that I pull out regularly and go, okay, what is that again? It brings you back to school, like immunology days, but he does a pretty good job, like trying to explain it in lay terms, I feel. And it has given so many of my clients like light bulb moments and hope of like, oh, I thought I was at the end of the line. I thought I had no other options left, but look at all these things that we can still look into and do. And it really has, changed the way I approach challenging cases and changed the way I've researched and dug more into the immune system aspect of things. So that's probably my like life altering book for me.
Okay.
And clients.
Is Your Body Baby Friendly? So we'll link that in the show notes as well. So tell our listeners like where they can find out more about you. I know you said that you have a program. You have a Fertility Labs 101 program. I know that you're on Instagram, which is how I found you, Fertility Confidence Method. Is there any other way that we can serve you or find you or do things to help you spread your word?
Yeah, that would be awesome. So Fertility Confidence Method on Instagram is probably one of the top platforms that we're on, but I also host my own podcast called the Fertility Confidence Podcast. There's tons and tons and tons of free support, resources, tools, strategies, labs, amazing guest experts there. So if you are in your fertility journey, or if you're listening and you have a friend or family member that you know is struggling, sharing the podcast with them is probably one of the better resources, because they can then pick and choose what they want to listen to. They can binge, they can really figure out who I am, if working together makes sense, but that's not what the podcast is about either. It's really a way for you to start to build out your own tools and strategies and care plan based on what your body needs. So Fertility Confidence Podcast on any of your favorite platforms. And I'll send you the link for Fertility Labs 101, and I can make you guys a little coupon code for that as well. You can throw in there.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time and for what you do. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I thought that episode was very fascinating with Dr. Kelsey Duncan. I like that we were able to talk about fertility, and hopefully if you're somebody who is struggling with fertility, this made you feel better or more hopeful in your journey to know not only that there are lots of people struggling with this, but that there are safe spaces you can go to get help with this. And a lot of times there are things that are just overlooked in traditional medicine, unfortunately, that could be optimized to help you in your journey. So please make sure that if you know anyone this could benefit, share this podcast episode with them. It may be life-changing to them. It may be that they just need some different labs, or they need a different mindset, or they just need a different provider to help them in their fertility route. So I would greatly appreciate you sharing this. Also, make sure that you're following us anywhere that you get your podcast episodes so you don't ever miss an episode. Please leave us any sort of review. I would appreciate that. Check me out on social media, Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. I love it when people comment on my post. Let me know what they want to hear about. Let me know what questions they have. I do a lot of webinars, Q&As as well now. So if you're on our mailing list or email list, then you'll get information about that. I try to post it on social media as well. Modern Endocrine is licensed in 39 states now, probably 50 by the end of the year. We are so happy to help with any medical issues that you have. You can learn about becoming a patient on our website. We would love to help you do one-on-one, health coaching and training and help you get through whatever you're going through. We have an amazing gut health program. I am so proud of it. We can do that in any state that you live in. We have a phenomenal 4-month program where we help you reset your gut. It comes with, a stool test. You get access to an app where I teach you every day. And we've been changing a lot of lives with that. So if you're interested in that, you can just buy a gut health test, a GI map on our website, and we'll be in contact with you. And we would love to help you in that journey as well. Thank you so much for your time this week. I hope that something that you learned will impact your life for the better. Join us next week on the next episode of Hormones, Metabolism, and You. Have a great week.
The information presented, including any materials discussed, referenced, or linked within this podcast, are for general educational purposes only, not the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed from you listening to this podcast or utilizing any of the information provided. I am a doctor, but I am not talking to you as your doctor. The information provided is not intended to diagnose or treat health problems, or take the place of the professional medical care provided by your doctor. If you are experiencing any health problems, including problems you believe have been touched upon in any respect within this podcast, you should consult your doctor about the problems without delay. You may ask your doctor whether he or she believes the information I have provided would be helpful to you, but you should still consult your doctor immediately and follow his or her medical advice as your treating physician. I'm just here to provide you basic knowledge about the issues we discuss so you are more aware of them and can better discuss them with your doctor. That's why we call it Back to the Basics. Join me on the next episode as we continue our journey.